My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 29 years old. 14 years ago, on a freezing March night in Portland, Oregon, my father looked me straight in the eye and said, "Get out. I don't need a manipulative daughter in this house." I was 15. It was pouring rain, wind tearing through the trees, the kind of storm that makes the power flicker. I stood on the front porch in socks, no umbrella, no plan, watching my mother hold my younger sister like I was a stranger. The reason? My sister told a lie. A careful, deliberate lie that my parents believed without hesitation. And just like that, I was erased. 3 hours later, a police officer called them from the emergency room. I'd been hit by a car. When my dad walked into that hospital room and saw who was sitting beside my bed, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. How are you here?" he kept repeating. The woman sitting next to me wasn't just anyone. She was Professor Naomi Alvarez, one of the most respected education reform advocates in the Pacific Northwest. She had found me bleeding on the side of the road. And she had decided I was worth saving. That night changed everything. Last month, I stood on stage at my sister's university graduation as the keynote speaker. My parents had no idea I was coming. Before I tell you what happened when they saw me, take a second and subscribe to Women Reddit Stories. If stories about resilience, betrayal, and reclaiming your power mean something to you, this is your place. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I learned early that in our house, Emily's tears were louder than my achievements. When I was 10, I won first place at the statewide robotics competition. I'd spent months building a prototype water purification device using recycled parts from Dad's garage. I still remember the weight of the metal around my neck, the way my teacher hugged me and said, "You're going to do incredible things someday, Claire." I ran home with the certificate clutched in my hands, heart pounding, bursting through the front door. "Mom. Dad. I won." Mom was in the kitchen slicing apples. She smiled, wiped her hands on a towel, and hugged me. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Then Emily walked in. 8 years old. Dance bag slung over her shoulder. Mascara streaked under her eyes. "I fell during my solo," she whispered, and then burst into tears. Everyone laughed. Mom's arms slipped away from me. She knelt down in front of Emily instantly. "Oh honey, it's okay. They're just jealous." Dad came from the living room. "What happened?" "Claire's being too loud," Emily sniffed. "She doesn't care that I had the worst day ever." I stood there holding my medal. No one asked to see it. That was the pattern. Emily was fragile. Emily was sensitive. Emily needed protection. I learned to celebrate quietly. To shrink. To take up less space. By middle school, I stopped showing them my report cards. Straight A's weren't impressive if Emily had cried about AB. When I got accepted into a prestigious summer STEM program in Seattle, full scholarship, hands-on research with engineers, I thought maybe this time it would be different. Dad glanced up from his phone. "That's nice, Claire." Emily's fork clattered onto her plate. "So she just gets to leave? For 2 weeks?" Mom's expression shifted. "Claire, maybe you could defer it. Your sister has her recital rehearsals. She gets anxious when you're gone." "I worked for this," I said quietly. "And you'll have other opportunities," Mom replied. "Family comes first." Emily looked at me over her glass of milk. Her eyes weren't watery. They were calculating. I didn't go to the program. They said I was being mature. Understanding. The bigger person. I learned to be small. The lies started subtly when Emily turned 12. She'd borrow my clothes without asking. When I gently pointed out, she'd deny it. "I never touched your jacket." Even when it was on her bedroom chair. Mom would sigh. "Claire, stop picking fights." Then money went missing from Dad's wallet. $40. Emily said she saw me near the counter that morning. I hadn't been. I left for school early for debate practice. Dad called me into his office. Did you take it? No. Emily says you did. She's lying. His jaw tightened. Don't accuse your sister. But I didn't. That's enough. I lost my phone for a month. The following year's advanced math camp, gone. We can't trust you right now, Mom said softly. Emily watched from the hallway. When our parents turned away, she smiled. That stolen $40 was a test run. And she realized she could get away with anything. The pattern escalated. A shattered vase. My fault. A failed science quiz. I didn't help her enough. A rumor at school about her copying homework. Apparently, I started it. I stopped defending myself. What was the point? They believed her tears over my truth every single time. By 15, I felt like a guest in my own house. Present. Useful when convenient. Blamable when necessary. I stayed late at school. Joined clubs. Volunteered. Anything to avoid going home. I told myself I just needed to survive until college. 3 more years. I was wrong. It started with a boy named Marcus. He sat next to me in AP chemistry. Smart. Awkward. Terrible at lab measurements. He'd asked for help balancing equations, and I stayed after class once or twice to explain molarity. That was it. Emily had a crush on him. A dramatic, obsessive crush. She'd written Emily Carter Marcus Bennett in her notebook. I'd seen it accidentally when I grabbed my pen from her desk. One afternoon, Marcus caught me at my locker. Thanks for the help. You saved me on that lab report. No problem. Maybe we could study for finals together? Sure. Library works. I felt eyes on me. Emily stood at the end of the hallway. Watching. That night, she barely spoke at dinner. Just pushed her food around. Mom kept asking what was wrong. I'm fine, she whispered. Silence from Emily was more dangerous than tears. 2 days later, my history teacher announced a visiting speaker would be coming the following week, Professor Naomi Alvarez from the University of Oregon. A nationally recognized expert in educational equity. After her lecture, I stayed behind to ask a question about policy reform. She looked at me thoughtfully. You ask sharp questions, she said. Have you considered studying education systems? I laughed nervously. Maybe someday. She handed me her card. Don't let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter. I didn't know then that she would become the reason I survived. A week later, the storm rolled in. The weather alert buzzed on Dad's phone all afternoon. Wind advisory. Flood warning. Power outage risk. Emily hadn't spoken to me in 3 days. Friday night. 7:48 p.m. Rain slammed against the windows. The lights flickered once. I was upstairs finishing a paper when I heard it, loud, broken sobbing from the living room. Emily. Dad's voice thundered, Claire. Down here. Now. My stomach dropped. I walked downstairs slowly. Each step heavier than the last. Emily sat curled into Mom's side on the couch. Her face was red. Tear-streaked. Perfect. Dad stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. What's going on? I asked. Emily looked at me. For a split second, less than a second, her eyes were dry. Cold. Then she saw a parter. Tell her, Dad said. Emily's voice trembled. Why do you hate me so much? I don't, what? You've been spreading rumors about me. About Marcus. About cheating. My mind went blank. That's not true. Mom's face hardened. We saw the messages, Claire. What messages? Emily pulled out her phone. Screenshots. Group chat messages supposedly from my account. Vicious things I would never write. But there was my name. My profile picture. I didn't send those. Stop lying. Dad's voice cracked like thunder. And you pushed me, Emily said suddenly, pulling up her sleeve. A deep purple bruise. On the stairs. You said you wished I was never born. The room spun. I never touched you. She wouldn't hurt herself, Mom whispered. I felt something inside me fracture. She's been lying about me for years. Dad stepped toward me. Is this true? Have you been bullying your sister? No. Please. Just listen. I've heard enough. He pointed toward the front door. Get out. Rain pounded the roof. Thunder rattled the glass. Dad, it's storming. I don't care. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. His voice went flat. Cold. I don't need a manipulative daughter like you in this house. Mom didn't move. She held Emily tighter. I grabbed my jacket. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip it. The door slammed behind me. Through the window, I saw Emily watching. She wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling. And I stepped into the storm. The rain hit me like a wall. Cold. Heavy. Relentless. Within seconds, my hair was plastered to my face, my socks soaked through, my jacket clinging to my skin. The wind howled down our street, bending the trees sideways. Somewhere in the distance, a transformer popped, and half the block went dark. I stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the closed door. Maybe Dad would open it. Maybe Mom would come running out. Maybe someone would realize this was insane. The porch light flickered once. Then I went out. No one came. I stepped off the porch. I didn't have a plan. Just one thought, away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 12% battery. I pulled it out, shielding it from the rain. I called my best friend, Hannah. Straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Claire. Never mind. I hung up before I could explain. Everyone was home with their families. Safe. Dry. Wanted. I started walking toward the main road. The sidewalks were already flooding, water pooling around my ankles. Cars rushed past, spraying sheets of dirty rainwater over me. No one slowed down. The bus station was about 2 miles away. If I could get there, I could sit under the awning. Figure something out. Lightning cracked overhead, splitting the sky white for a second. I thought about turning around. Knocking. Apologizing for something I didn't do. Begging. But I could still hear Dad's voice. I don't need a manipulative daughter. The word echoed. Manipulative. Maybe he was right. Maybe something was wrong with me. Why else would they choose Emily every time? The rain intensified. My teeth started chattering. My hands were numb. Halfway to the intersection near Hawthorne Boulevard, the streetlights went out completely. The neighborhood plunged into darkness except for the occasional headlights slicing through the rain. I waited at the crosswalk. The signal flickered green. I stepped forward. I didn't see the car until it was almost on top of me. Headlights burst through the rain, blinding and sudden. A horn blared. Tires screeched against wet pavement. I froze for half a second too long. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. I felt myself lifted, weightless, then slammed sideways against metal before hitting asphalt. Hard. My head cracked against the pavement. White-hot pain exploded behind my eyes. I couldn't breathe. Rain poured into my mouth. My vision blurred. Everything tilted sideways, wrong. I heard a car door slam. Footsteps splashing through water. Oh my God. Oh my God. A woman's voice. Panicked but controlled. Sweetheart, can you hear me? I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Don't move. Stay still. I'm calling 911. Her hands were warm despite the rain. Gentle but firm on my shoulders. Stay with me. What's your name? Claire, I whispered, barely audible. Claire. Okay. Claire, I'm here. You're going to be okay. Her face hovered above me, rain streaming down dark curls. Something about her felt familiar, but my thoughts were slipping away. My parents, I croaked. What about them? They don't want me. She froze. What? They kicked me out. My throat burned. Said. I'm manipulative. Her expression changed. Shock. Then something harder. You're 15? I nodded weakly. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. You're going to be okay, she said again, but her voice shook now. I promise. The last thing I saw before everything went black was her face above me, rain pouring between us. Sound came back first. Beeping. Rhythmic. Mechanical. The smell of antiseptic. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Voices, urgent, overlapping. She has a concussion. Possible internal bleeding. Prep for scans. That bruise on her shoulder. I'm staying, a familiar voice said. Firm now. No panic. I'm not leaving her alone. I tried to open my eyes. Too heavy. My body felt disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. Ma'am, are you family? I'm the one who hit her with my car. But she's a minor, and she was alone in a storm at 10:47 p.m. I'm not leaving until her parents arrive. Time blurred. At some point, I heard Dad's voice. Tense. Controlled. We're Claire Bennett's parents. A pause. Then the woman's voice again. Colder this time. Professional. I'm Professor Naomi Alvarez. Silence. Recognition. You're with the University of Oregon, Mom said faintly. I am. A beat. I'm also the driver who hit your daughter tonight. Dad cleared his throat. It was an accident. She was crossing during a storm, Mom added quickly. She was 15 years old, Professor Alvarez replied evenly. Why was she alone in that storm? Silence stretched thick between them. We had a family situation, Dad said finally. A discipline issue. A discipline issue? Her voice sharpened. What kind of discipline issue involves sending a minor out during a flood warning? It wasn't like that, Mom insisted. Then what was it like? I heard footsteps shifting near my bed. She told me her parents didn't want her anymore, Professor Alvarez continued. She said you called her manipulative and told her to leave. That's not, Mom started. She was barely conscious, Dad cut in. She could have been confused. She wasn't confused. The certainty in Professor Alvarez's voice cut through the room. I need to speak with a social worker, she added. That won't be necessary, Dad snapped. We're her parents. We'll handle this. With all due respect, you've handled it enough. Another voice entered the room. Deeper. Authoritative. Mr. Bennett? We're going to need to ask you some questions. A police officer. You haven't done anything wrong, the officer asked calmly. Then you won't mind explaining why your 15-year-old daughter was wandering alone during a severe storm. The room fell quiet. I forced my eyes open. Everything was blurry shapes and fluorescent glare. I saw Dad's outline at the foot of the bed. Mom beside him. Behind them, Professor Alvarez stood straight, arms folded. Watching. She's waking up, someone said. Everyone out, Professor Alvarez ordered. She's our daughter, Dad protested. And I'm the adult who found her bleeding in the street. Out. Footsteps. The door is closing. The room went quieter. A warm hand wrapped around mine. You're safe now, she whispered. I promise. Safe. The word felt foreign. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me again. When I woke up fully, it was daylight. 3 days had passed. And my parents were gone. Professor Naomi Alvarez was still there. When I woke up fully, sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds in thin, pale strips. My head felt packed with cotton. Every movement sent a dull ache radiating down my neck and into my shoulders. The beeping machine beside me kept a steady rhythm. Alive. Professor Naomi Alvarez sat in the chair next to my bed, reading a thick folder of papers. She looked up the second my fingers twitched. Hey, she said softly. Welcome back. My throat was dry. How long? 3 days since the accident. Severe concussion. You gave us a scare. Us. Not them. You stayed? Of course I did. There was no hesitation in her voice. A nurse came in to check my vitals. After she left, Professor Alvarez leaned forward slightly. Do you remember what happened? Bits and pieces flickered. Rain. Headlights. Dad's voice. Emily's smile. They kicked me out. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes. Did they come? They visited once. Once. They brought clothes, she continued. And schoolwork. Did they apologize? She didn't answer immediately. That told me enough. A knock interrupted us. A woman in her mid-40s stepped inside with a clipboard and kind eyes. Claire? I'm Megan. I'm a social worker. My stomach tightened. Professor Alvarez didn't move from her chair. She folded her hands calmly, like she had all the time in the world. Megan sat beside the bed. I just need to ask you a few questions about home. About what happened the night of the storm. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then I told her everything. The robotics medal. The STEM program I never attended. The stolen money. The fake screenshots. The bruise. The door. The word manipulative. Megan wrote quietly, nodding. When I finished, she closed her folder slowly. Claire, she said gently, you don't have to go back if you don't feel safe. The sentence hung in the air. Where would I go? I whispered. Professor Alvarez cleared her throat softly. She could stay with me. I turned my head toward her, certain I'd misheard. What? Megan looked up. Professor Alvarez has already inquired about temporary guardianship placement. My heart pounded painfully in my ears. Why? Professor Alvarez met my eyes. Steady. Warm. Because someone once did it for me, she said quietly. When I was 16, my parents decided I was inconvenient. A teacher opened her home to me. Changed my life. She leaned closer. You are not manipulative. You are not broken. You are exceptionally intelligent and very clearly unsupported. Tears slid sideways into my hairline. I hadn't cried in years. Not in front of anyone. I'll understand if you want to go home, she continued. But if you want something different, I can offer you safety. Safe again. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. I don't want to go back, I said. The legal process took 6 weeks. 6 long weeks of paperwork, supervised check-ins, and stiff hospital room conversations with my parents. Dad stood at the foot of my bed during their final visit. Arms crossed. Defensive. You're overreacting, he said. This is a temporary teenage drama. Mom avoided my eyes. We never meant for it to go that far. You told me to leave. Dad's jaw tightened. You pushed your sister. I didn't. Silence. Professor Alvarez stood near the window, quiet but present. In the end, the court granted temporary guardianship to Professor Alvarez pending further review. My parents didn't fight it. That hurt more than if they had. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like it had before. Professor Alvarez's Naomi, she insisted eventually, lived in a quiet neighborhood near the university. Her house smelled like books and coffee and lavender. There were plants in every window and framed degrees on the walls. She gave me the guest room. Let me choose new bedding. Let me paint one wall of soft sage green. Make it yours, she said. At my new school, no one knew about Emily. No one knew about the storm. I was just Claire Bennett. Smart. Focused. Free. Naomi exposed me to a world I hadn't known existed. University lectures. Policy discussions. Research symposiums. Education is power, she'd say over dinner. Systems either protect vulnerable students or abandon them. I intend to change that. I listened carefully. Straight A's meant something again. They weren't competition. They were possibilities. I stopped shrinking. One evening, about 4 months into living there, Naomi set a college catalog in front of me. Have you thought about what you want to study? Engineering, maybe, I said. Then hesitated. Or education policy. She smiled. You'd be extraordinary at either. I thought about my old house sometimes. Wondered if Emily ever admitted the truth. If Dad ever replayed that night in his head. I heard small updates through mutual acquaintances. Emily was thriving. Drama club. Student council. Still the center of everything. My parents had taken my photos off the walls. Like I'd never existed. Good, I told myself. Let them. Senior year came fast. I applied to colleges quietly. Naomi helped me write essays that didn't center on trauma but on resilience. On systems. On reform. I received a full scholarship to Stanford. The acceptance email arrived at 11:43 p.m. I ran downstairs barefoot. Naomi was grading papers at the dining table. I got in, I breathed. She stood slowly, read the screen, then pulled me into the tightest hug I'd ever had. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. And for the first time, I believed someone meant it. College was a blur of late nights, study sessions, and slowly learning how to trust people again. I majored in education policy and institutional reform. I wanted to understand how families failed children, and how systems could intervene before it was too late. Summers, I interned with youth advocacy nonprofits. I learned how funding worked. How scholarships were structured. How grants were written. I learned how to turn pain into policy. By 24, I had a proposal. A scholarship fund specifically for students displaced by family rejection. Kids kicked out. Kids abandoned. Kids who needed safe housing and tuition assistance. I called it the Harbor Initiative. Naomi helped me refine the grant proposals. We secured initial funding from 2 foundations. Launched the program at 1 university. Then 2. Then 5. By the time I was 27, we'd provided over $250,000 in scholarships and emergency housing grants. 72 students had stayed in school because of it. Local media noticed. I told my story carefully. Never named names. Never mentioned Emily. Just a 15-year-old girl left in a storm. One afternoon, my colleague Daniel knocked on my office door. Claire, he said, grinning. You're being considered for a keynote address. Where? University of Washington. My stomach dropped. That was Emily's school. She graduates this spring, Daniel added, scanning his tablet. Communications major. I hadn't heard her name spoken aloud in years. Do you want me to decline? He asked gently. I stared at the scholarship applications on my desk. 72 students. 72 second chances. What's the theme? Resilience and systemic equity. Of course it was. Will I have full control over my speech? I asked. Complete. I leaned back in my chair slowly. 14 years. 14 years since the storm. They had no idea who I'd become. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I didn't answer Daniel right away. I told him I needed a day. That night, Naomi and I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd once run down with my Stanford acceptance letter. A soft rain tapped against the windows, gentle this time, not violent. They asked me to keynote at UW, I said. Naomi didn't look surprised. That's a big honor. It's Emily's school. She set her fork down slowly. Ah. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable. Thoughtful. They won't know I'm coming, I said. I checked the public program draft. My name is listed as Claire Bennett, Director of the Harbor Initiative. No connection. Do you want them to know? I considered that carefully. I don't want revenge, I said finally. I want truth. Naomi nodded once. Then speak the truth. Nothing more. I don't want to sound bitter. You won't, she said calmly. You've done too much healing for that. I exhaled slowly. I think I need to close it properly. Then do it with dignity, she replied. Not for them. For you. The next morning, I emailed Daniel. I accept. I didn't see Emily before the ceremony, but social media makes ghosts visible. Her Instagram was public. Carefully curated. Filtered sunsets. Graduation countdown posts. 4 years flew by. Couldn't have done it without my amazing parents' #FamilyFirst. I stared at that caption longer than I should have. There were no pictures of me. No trace of an older sister in her digital universe. She'd rewritten history completely. One post stopped me. Emily sitting between mom and dad at a waterfront restaurant. Smiling wide. Celebrating early. So grateful for the two best people in the world. Dad's hair was almost completely gray now. Mom looked smaller somehow. Tired. They looked happy. I closed the app. Through an old high school acquaintance, I heard Emily was excited for graduation. Her friends were planning a big after-party. The keynote speaker is supposed to be inspiring, someone wrote in a group chat I was accidentally still part of. Ugh, Emily replied. Those speeches are always so dramatic. But whatever. It's my day. I took a screenshot. Not for revenge. Just documentation. She had no idea. I wrote my speech over 2 weeks. Draft. Cut. Revise. I started with statistics about educational displacement. Students pushed out of homes due to family conflict. The long-term academic impact. Then I shifted it slowly. At 15, I was told I didn't belong. I practiced in front of the mirror, watching my face remain composed. No shaking. No anger. Just clarity. Naomi listened to it 3 times in the living room. Remove the accusatory tone there, she suggested once. Let the audience draw their own conclusions. I adjusted it. Don't name anyone, she reminded me. Truth doesn't need names. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the storm in my mind. The slam of the door. The headlights. Second thoughts? Naomi asked softly from my doorway, holding a mug of chamomile tea. Just memories. You're not that girl anymore, she said gently. Remember that. I know. Head high. Calm voice. I smiled faintly. Always. The campus was buzzing the next morning. Blue and gold banners draped across brick buildings. Graduates posing for photos. Families laughing, crying, adjusting caps. I arrived early, dressed in a navy suit. Professional but understated. Naomi's pearl earrings, her gift to me when the Harbor Initiative expanded to 5 universities. In the mirror of the faculty restroom, I barely recognized myself. Confident. Composed. Not soaked. Not shaking. President Caldwell greeted me warmly in his office. Ms. Bennett, we're honored to have you. Thank you. You embody exactly what this class needs to hear. If only he knew. Backstage, the energy was controlled chaos. Faculty adjusting robes. Staff testing microphones. Graduates peeking through curtains at the crowd filling the auditorium. I scanned the printed program. Row 4. Emily Carter. Bachelor of Arts, Communications. My heart thudded once against my ribs. Hard. You good? Daniel asked quietly. Yes. Naomi arrived a few minutes later. Emerald dress. Calm smile. You've got this, she said. I nodded. From behind the curtain, I could see the audience filtering in. Hundreds of people. And their middle section, 8 rows back, Mom and Dad. Dad adjusting his tie. Mom clutching her purse. They were laughing about something. They didn't know. President Caldwell touched my shoulder. 5 minutes. I breathed in slowly. Smoothed my jacket. From the wings, I could see the podium centered under bright stage lights. This was it. Wait. Before I tell you what happened when I stepped onto that stage, I need to ask you something. Have you ever had someone rewrite your story as if you never existed? If so, you understand what it feels like to reclaim it. Now, back to the ceremony. President Caldwell stepped to the podium. The crowd quieted. Today we celebrate resilience, achievement, and the incredible journeys of our graduates. Applause rippled across the auditorium. Our keynote speaker has dedicated her career to supporting students displaced by family adversity. Please welcome Director of the Harbor Initiative, Ms. Claire Bennett. Polite applause filled the room. I stepped into the light. The brightness washed over me for a split second. I walked steadily toward the podium. Heels clicking softly against the stage floor. And then I saw her. Row 4. Emily. Clapping casually at first. Half turned toward her friend, whispering something. Then she looked up. Her hands froze mid-clap. Her smile faltered. Confusion flickered across her face. Then recognition. Her mouth parted slightly. No sound. Behind her, in row 8, Mom was still clapping. Dad too. Oblivious. I reached the podium. Adjusted the microphone. Good morning, I began. My voice carried clear and steady through the auditorium. Dad's head lifted slowly. He leaned forward. Mom's hand rose to her chest. I smiled professionally. Calm. Controlled. Thank you, President Caldwell. It's an honor to be here today. Silence settled across the room. Today, I want to talk about what happens when everything you thought was stable disappears. Emily's face had gone pale. At 15, a girl was told she didn't belong in her own home. The air shifted. Mom gripped Dad's arm. She was accused of things she didn't do. Labeled manipulative. Told she was too difficult to love. Whispers began to ripple faintly through the crowd. One night, in the middle of a violent storm, she was told to leave. Dad stopped breathing. I could see it from where I stood. She walked alone in that storm. No money. No place to go. Emily's shoulders stiffened. She was hit by a car. The auditorium went very, very quiet. But someone stopped. Someone chose to see potential instead of problems. I glanced toward Naomi. She gave me a small nod. That girl was me. The silence deepened. And this time, everyone understood. The silence stretched so wide it felt physical. Like the entire auditorium had collectively forgotten how to breathe. Emily's face drained of color completely. Her hands dropped into her lap. Her friend leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but Emily didn't respond. Row 8. Dad's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Mom's fingers dug into his sleeve so tightly her knuckles turned white. I didn't rush the moment. I let it sit. I survived that night because someone made a choice, I continued, voice steady. A choice to protect instead of punish. To listen instead of assume. I gestured gently toward Naomi in the front row. Professor Naomi Alvarez didn't know me. She had no obligation to me. But she chose to show up. A ripple moved through the audience as heads turned toward her. She taught me that rejection isn't the end of your story. It can be the beginning. Emily's eyes were glassy now. She stared at the floor. The Harbor Initiative was born from that storm, I said. It exists for students who've been told they are too much, too broken, too inconvenient to keep. A woman somewhere in the back whispered loudly, "Oh my God." I continued. Calm. Unshaken. Today, we've supported 72 students across multiple universities. Students who needed housing. Tuition. A second chance. Dad slowly sat back down in his seat. He had half risen without realizing it. I learned something important after that night, I said. Family is not defined by biology. It's defined by who chooses you when it matters. Naomi's eyes shimmered. She didn't look away from me. You don't need everyone to believe in you, I said. You need one person who sees the truth. Emily's friend had stopped whispering. She was staring at her now. Connecting pieces. And I learned, I added, gripping the edges of the podium lightly, that success is not about proving someone wrong. It's about building something meaningful despite them. A slow standing ovation began in the front rows. Students first. Then faculty. Then families. It built gradually. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just steady. Dad remained seated. Hands covering his mouth. Mom stood automatically, clapping weakly, tears streaking her mascara. Emily didn't move at all. I stepped back from the microphone. Congratulations, class of 2027, I finished softly. You decide who you become. No one else. The applause swelled again. President Caldwell returned to the stage beaming. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. That was extraordinary. I walked off stage into the wings and exhaled for what felt like the first time in 14 years. The ceremony continued. Names were called. Graduates crossed the stage. But the energy had shifted. People were whispering. Looking toward row 4. Looking toward row 8. Emily Carter. Emily stood. Her steps were mechanical. Controlled. Her smile strained so tightly it barely resembled one. When she accepted her diploma, the applause was uneven. Some clapped enthusiastically. Others hesitated. She walked off stage quickly. Didn't make eye contact with anyone. Dad and Mom sat rigid, staring straight ahead. When the ceremony ended and caps flew into the air, families rushed the aisles. Laughter, hugs, camera flashes. I slipped quietly toward the side exit where Daniel was waiting. You okay? He asked. Yes. You changed the entire room. That wasn't my goal. But you did. Naomi met us in the reception area outside. She wrapped me in a hug. You were flawless, she whispered. I feel lighter, I admitted. Daniel cleared his throat. Your parents are asking to see you. My stomach tightened briefly. Do I have to? No. I straightened my shoulders. I'll speak to them. 5 minutes. Naomi squeezed my hand. I'm right here. I walked toward the side entrance. They stood near a concrete pillar. Dad looked smaller somehow. Shoulders curved inward. Mom's eyes were red and swollen. Emily stood slightly behind them, clutching her diploma like a shield. I stopped 3 feet away. You wanted to talk? Dad swallowed. Claire, we didn't know you'd be here. I'm aware. Mom's voice trembled. You look, well. I am. Dad glanced briefly at Naomi, then back at me. We owe you an apology. You owe me far more than that, I replied calmly. But an apology is a start. He flinched. We made a terrible mistake, Mom whispered. You should have protected me, I said evenly. That's your job as parents. Emily shifted behind them. You called me manipulative, I continued. You threw me out in a storm. Dad's voice cracked. I've regretted that night every single day. Regret doesn't undo it. Mom reached toward me instinctively, then stopped herself. Can we talk privately? As a family? We're not a family, I said gently. Not cruel. Just factual. Silence. We can fix this, Dad insisted weakly. We want to fix it. There's nothing to fix, I replied. You made your choice. I made mine. Emily finally spoke. I'm sorry, she said, voice small. I was 12. I was jealous. You were old enough to know what you were doing, I said quietly. Her lips trembled. I didn't think it would go that far. But it did. Daniel approached discreetly, holding a folder. Claire, the new partnership documents from Oregon State. Dad's eyes dropped to the folder header, the Harbor Initiative, statewide expansion proposal. You really built all this? He asked. Yes. Mom's breath caught. You're a director? Senior director. President Caldwell passed by at that moment. Ms. Bennett. Incredible speech. We'd love to discuss expanding your program here. He turned to my parents warmly. You must be so proud. The silence that followed was thick. Naomi answered smoothly, they are. Dad forced a nod. Yes. Very proud. President Caldwell smiled and walked away. Dad stared at me differently now. Not dismissively. Not skeptically. Like he was seeing me for the first time. We didn't know, he said weakly. You never asked, I replied. Emily's friends approached hesitantly. Emily, is that really your sister? One asked. Emily nodded slowly. You told us she died, another friend said quietly. My eyebrows lifted. You told them I was dead? I asked. Emily's face flushed crimson. It was easier. Easier than telling the truth? Her friends exchanged glances. One of them looked at me and said softly, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Thank you, I replied. They walked away, leaving Emily standing alone. Mom reached for her. Emily pulled slightly away. I wanted to tell them, Emily whispered. But I was scared. Of what? That they'd hate me. I studied her face carefully. For the first time, there was no calculation. No performance. Just fear. I don't hate you, I said calmly. I forgive you for my own peace. Hope flickered across her face. But I don't want a relationship, I finished. That's the boundary. Her expression crumpled. Dad stepped forward slightly. Please. We can try. No, I said firmly. You made choices for 14 years. You chose to keep me erased. Mom started crying again. Naomi touched my elbow gently. Ready? Yes. I looked at them one last time. I hope you do better from here, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Emily sobbing. Dad calling my name. But the storm was over. And this time, I wasn't walking into it. The week after graduation, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Unknown numbers. Voicemails. Emails with subject lines that all said the same thing in different ways. Please talk to us. We're so sorry. We need to explain. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. Because I was tired. The speech had spread faster than I expected. Someone had recorded it from the balcony and uploaded it to social media. At first, it was a few thousand views. Then 10,000. Then 50. Comments flooded in. This gave me chills. Family isn't blood. It's who shows up. I'm crying in my car. Is this real? What happened to the sister? I ignored the speculation and focused on work. The Harbor Initiative applications tripled within a week. Students from across the state were reaching out. But then an email arrived that I couldn't ignore. Subject line, you deserve to know. It was from one of Emily's former friends. Inside were screenshots of group chats. Emily's name at the top. Messages scrolling down. Wait, so your sister didn't die? You lied about that? That's messed up. I can't believe you made up a whole story. My cousin saw the speech. Everyone's talking about it. I'm not inviting her to my birthday. I don't want drama. One message stood out. She said her sister died in a car accident when she was 12. That's psychotic. I closed the laptop slowly. Part of me felt a small twist of guilt. A larger part felt nothing at all. Naomi watched me carefully from across the kitchen table that evening. How are you processing it? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. I feel free. She smiled gently. You set a boundary publicly and calmly. That's powerful. They want to reconcile. Do you? I didn't hesitate this time. No. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then that's your answer. 2 weeks later, my assistant buzzed my office. Claire, there's a Richard Carter here to see you. He says he's your father. The word father felt foreign. Give me 5 minutes, I said. I closed my laptop. Straightened the stack of grant proposals on my desk. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Dad had aged. Not just gray hair, his posture had changed. Shoulders slumped. Lines etched deeper around his mouth. Thank you for seeing me, he said quietly. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. He nodded, sitting across from me stiffly. Like this was a job interview. Claire. I need to say this properly. I didn't interrupt. We were wrong, he said. I was wrong. Silence hung between us. Emily told us the truth, he continued. Everything. The screenshots. The bruise. The lies. 14 years too late. I know that doesn't fix anything, he added quickly. But we've lived with that guilt every day. You chose to believe her, I said calmly. I know. His voice cracked. I failed you. Yes. Tears filled his eyes. I've replayed that night thousands of times, he said. The door. The storm. I never meant for it to. But it did, I interrupted softly. He swallowed. Can you forgive me? I leaned back in my chair. Forgiveness isn't the issue, I said carefully. Trust is. And trust is broken. He nodded weakly. What can I do? Nothing. The word landed between us like a final period. There is nothing you can do. He looked at me for a long time, like he was memorizing my face. I am proud of you, he said quietly. That's not something you get to claim. He flinched. My phone buzzed with a meeting reminder. I have to go, I said. He stood slowly. I'm sorry. I know. He left. I didn't cry after. I just felt steady. 3 days later, I received an email from Emily. I almost deleted it without reading. But I opened it. It was long. She admitted everything. The jealousy. The planning. The fake screenshots. The bruise she created by pressing against the stair railing. The way she knew Mom and Dad would believe her. I didn't think Dad would actually throw you out, she wrote. When I saw you walk into the storm, I felt sick. But I was too proud to stop it. She told me she'd lied for years because it was easier than telling the truth. I destroyed your life, she wrote. And I destroyed mine. She said she'd lost friends. Lost a job offer after someone from graduation told HR about the speech. I don't expect forgiveness, she finished. I just needed you to know. I read it twice. Then I replied with 3 sentences. I accept that you were young. But you had 14 years to correct it. I forgive you for my peace. Please respect my boundary and do not contact me again. She never responded. Meanwhile, the Harbor Initiative exploded. A local news station invited me for an interview. I agreed only if we focused on the students, not my personal story. One scholarship recipient spoke on camera. This program saved my life, she said. I was living in my car before they stepped in. Applications tripled again. 3 more universities signed partnership agreements. The State Education Board sent a formal commendation for contributions to equity reform. Daniel leaned against my office door one afternoon. You're basically a movement now. I just wanted to help a few kids, I replied. You did. Emily's social media went silent. Eventually, her accounts turned private. Mom tried calling once. I didn't answer. Dad sent one final email. We're proud of you. Even if we don't deserve to say it. I didn't respond. That fall, Naomi was invited to speak at a national education conference in Chicago. Come with me, she said. As my colleague. We flew out together. Shared a hotel suite overlooking the city skyline. At dinner, she raised her glass. You built this, she said. No, I replied. You gave me a chance. She shook her head gently. I opened a door. You walked through it. For the first time in years, I believed that too. 1 year after Emily's graduation, the Harbor Initiative was operating in 10 universities. 83 students supported. 83 storms survived. I was promoted to executive director. I moved into a larger office with windows overlooking campus. And when I filled out emergency contact forms for yet another institutional grant, I didn't hesitate. Naomi Alvarez. Relationship, mother. The word felt right. For the first time in my life, it wasn't biology. It was choice. 1 year after that graduation, my life felt steady in a way it never had before. Not dramatic. Not flashy. Just steady. The Harbor Initiative expanded into 12 universities. We secured long-term housing partnerships. Built an emergency fund for students displaced mid-semester. 91 students supported. 91 lives interrupted by family rejection, and redirected. Sometimes I'd walk through campus and see one of them laughing with friends, backpack slung over one shoulder, and I'd think, you're still here. That matters. I dated someone briefly, a public policy analyst named Aaron. Kind. Patient. It didn't last, but it ended gently. No storms. No slammed doors. I was learning that endings didn't have to be violent to be real. Naomi turned 61 that spring. We threw her a small dinner party at the house. Former students came. Colleagues. 2 young women who had once stayed in our guest room during transitional housing placements. Chosen family filled the dining room. I raised a glass. To the woman who taught me that family is built, not assigned. Naomi laughed softly, wiping at her eyes. You make it sound so grand. It is grand, I replied. Later that night, after everyone left and the dishes were drying in the rack, she looked at me across the kitchen. You're at peace, she observed. I think I am. I didn't think about my biological family often anymore. Sometimes a thought would drift in. I wondered if Emily ever went to therapy. If Dad still replayed the sound of that door slamming. If Mom ever walked past my old bedroom and paused. They sent a Christmas card that year. No return address. Just signatures. Richard. Laura. Emily. No message. I placed it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. I didn't respond. It simply existed. Like they did. In the past. Every October 12th, the anniversary of that storm, I drive past the old neighborhood. Not to punish myself. Not to reopen wounds. Just to remember. I park across the street from the house. The paint is a different color now. The maple tree in the yard has grown taller. Sometimes there are lights on inside. Sometimes not. I sit there quietly and think about the 15-year-old girl who stood on that porch in soaked socks. The girl who believed maybe she was too manipulative to love. The girl who walked into a storm because she thought she had nowhere else to go. She survived. Not because her parents came after her. Because someone else did. And because she chose to keep walking. I don't regret that night anymore. I don't romanticize it either. It was traumatic. It was wrong. But it was also the pivot point of my life. It forced me to see clearly what I would, and would not, accept. People ask me sometimes, after a conference or a speech, do you ever think about reconciling? My answer is always the same. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can forgive someone and still keep your door closed. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity. Emily has sent a few short emails over the past year. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. I'm in therapy. I read them. I don't respond. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. Either choice is mine. Dad hasn't written again. Mom tried calling once more in the spring. I let it ring. I don't feel anger anymore when their names appear. Just distance. And distance, I've learned, can be healthy. Naomi Amam is the emergency contact on every form I fill out. The person I call when a new university signs a contract. The first one I text when a student graduates. She showed up every day. For 14 years. Consistency built that bond. Choice built that bond. Not blood. Blood didn't keep me safe in a storm. Choice did. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own storm, literal or metaphorical, I need you to hear this clearly. Someone else's rejection is not proof of your unworthiness. Someone calling you manipulative, dramatic, too sensitive, too much, that is their limitation, not your identity. You are not defined by who leaves. You are defined by what you build after they do. The Harbor Initiative was never about revenge. It was about purpose. Revenge wants someone else to hurt. Purpose wants someone else to heal. I chose purpose. You can too. So that's my story. At 15, my parents left me in a storm over my sister's lie. My father's hands shook when he walked into that hospital room and saw who had chosen to save me. He lost control of the narrative that night. But I gained control of my future. I'm 29 now. My life is quiet. Stable. Intentional. The storm didn't destroy me. It revealed who I was going to become. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to set boundaries, rebuild after betrayal, or choose yourself when no one else would, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories right now. Stories like this exist because someone out there needs to hear that survival is possible. Thriving is possible. And if you're still in the rain, keep walking. You never know who's about to stop and choose you.